She had one box, a small, ordinary cardboard box that sat on the top shelf of her closet for 37 years. Nobody was ever allowed to touch it. Nobody ever asked why. And when she died, when she was finally gone, that box did not stay closed for long. What was inside did not just change what they knew about their mother. It changed what they knew about themselves. Some secrets are kept out of love, and some are kept out of something else entirely. This is a story about a woman who carried one of the heaviest kinds of secrets a person can carry. Not a lie told out of cruelty, but a decision made in a moment of fear that grew into something no single conversation could ever undo. By the time her children finished reading what was inside that box, 3 siblings had stopped speaking to each other. A man none of them had ever met was suddenly part of their family. And everything their mother had ever told them about their father, about who he was, about why he left, turned out to be a version of the truth so carefully edited it barely resembled the real thing. There are 3 questions this story will not let go of. Did she keep the secret to protect her children, or to protect herself? What do you do when the person you loved most turns out to have been someone you never fully knew? And can a family survive the truth when the lie was the foundation everything was built on? Her name was Carol. She was 69 years old when she passed, and by every visible measure she had lived a full and decent life. She was the kind of woman who cooked Sunday dinners for 12 people without being asked. She remembered every birthday. Not just the years, but the days, the small details, what each person had wanted, and whether they had gotten it. She was private in the way that certain women of her generation were private. Not cold, not distant, but contained. She held things inward. She processed quietly, decided quietly, and moved on quietly. To her children, this was simply who she was. It would take her death and a cardboard box for them to understand that the quietness had not always been a personality trait. For 37 years, it had also been a survival mechanism. There were 3 children. The eldest was Daniel, 51 at the time of her passing, a calm and methodical man who had spent his adult life in construction management and who handled most things the way he handled a building site, with a checklist, a plan, yet and very little visible emotion. The middle child was Karen, 48, a school teacher, the most openly emotional of the 3, and the one who had always been closest to their mother in temperament, if not always in conversation. And then there was the youngest, Marcus, 46, the one who had been only 4 years old when their father left, the one who had the fewest memories of the family being whole. Their father's name was Robert. He had left when Marcus was 4, and Karen was 6, and Daniel was 9. Their mother had explained it the same way every time any of them asked, which, as they grew older, was less and less often. She would say that Robert had chosen a different kind of life, and that it was nobody's fault, and that sometimes 2 people simply were not built for the same future. She did not cry about it, at least not in front of them. She did not speak badly of him. She simply moved forward, and she expected them to do the same, and for the most part they did, because she had given them no other option and no reason to want one. The closet had always been off-limits. Not dramatically, not with a lock and a warning, but simply in the way that certain things in a household communicate their boundaries without needing to be stated. The box on the top shelf was one of those things. Daniel remembered noticing it as a teenager, and knowing without being told that it was not his to open. Karen had once asked about it, just once, when she was about 12, and their mother had said it was private paperwork, and changed the subject so smoothly that Karen had not thought to ask again. Marcus barely remembered it at all, and he had been too young for the closet to register as anything more than background. Carol passed on a Thursday in late October. Her illness had been short. A diagnosis in August, a rapid progression, a final few weeks in a hospice that the family attended in rotating shifts. She had been conscious and present for most of it. She had spoken to each of her children privately. She had said she loved them. She had said she was proud of them. She had said all the things a dying mother says when she knows the end is close and wants to leave the right words behind. What she did not say, what she chose even then, at the end, to keep inside, was the one thing that would have changed everything. Before we go any further, let us know in the comments where you are watching from. We would love to hear from you. And do not forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. 3 days after the funeral, Daniel drove back to the family home to begin sorting through her belongings. It was a practical task, and he approached it practically. Boxes for donation, boxes for keeping, a methodical room-by-room process that he had mapped out in his head on the drive over. He started in the living room. He worked through the kitchen. He saved the bedroom for last. The closet took him less than 20 minutes. Most of it was clothes, shoes, the ordinary accumulation of a woman's life. He was almost finished when he reached the top shelf and found the box. It was lighter than he expected. He almost set it aside without opening it. He is not entirely sure, even now, why he didn't. He took it to the bed, sat down, and lifted the lid. Inside was a bundle of letters tied with kitchen twine. A black and white photograph of a man he did not recognize. Younger than his mother would have been when it was taken, standing outside a house Daniel had never seen, squinting slightly against what looked like afternoon sun. A birth certificate, folded in half, and beneath all of it, a single document. Legal paper, typed, signed at the bottom in 2 places. His mother's signature on one line, a name he had never seen on the other. He unfolded the birth certificate first. The name at the top was Marcus James Whitfield. The date of birth was correct. The mother's name was correct. But the father's name was not Robert. The father's name was Gerald Allen Morrow. Daniel sat on the edge of the bed for a long time. He did not reach for his phone right away. He needed to read it again. He needed to read the legal document, which turned out to be a paternity suppression agreement, a private legal filing signed in 1987, 2 years after Marcus was born, in which Gerald Allen Morrow agreed to relinquish all parental claims and to make no attempt at contact in exchange for a financial settlement. The settlement amount was listed. It was not a large number, but it was signed, it was witnessed, it was legal. He sat there and he understood what he was holding. And then he picked up his phone and called his sister. Karen arrived 40 minutes later. She stood in the doorway of the bedroom and looked at the box on the bed and looked at her brother's face and knew before he said a single word that something had shifted. He showed her the birth certificate first. She read it twice, and then he showed her the legal document. She sat down on the floor, not on the bed, on the floor, and did not speak for a moment. Then she said, "We have to call Marcus." Marcus drove over. He did not ask questions on the phone. He arrived, walked into the bedroom, looked at the 2 documents on the bed, and went completely still. His sister had been crying quietly since she arrived. His brother was standing by the window with his arms crossed, watching him. Marcus picked up the birth certificate. He held it. He set it down. He picked up the photograph and studied the face of the man squinting in the afternoon sun. He set that down too. Then he sat on the floor beside his sister, which is where Karen still was, and he did not say a single word for 11 minutes. Daniel timed it. The question that finally broke the silence came from Karen. She asked, "Why would she do this?" And that question, so simple, so impossible, was the one that the three of them would spend the next 2 years trying to answer. The legal document told them the facts. It did not tell them the reason. Their mother had entered into a private legal agreement to suppress Gerald Morrow's name from Marcus's birth record. She had accepted money. She had bound him to silence. And she had never told any of her children that any of this existed. The man they knew as their father, Robert, had left the family 2 years after signing nothing, knowing nothing, or so it appeared. He had simply left. Whether he had known about Marcus's real parentage was another question the documents could not answer. Karen was the first to speak in their mother's defense.
She must have had a reason. She was not a cruel person. Whatever she did, she had a reason.
Daniel did not disagree with this, but he said quietly that a reason and a right were not the same thing. Marcus said nothing at all. He stood up after a while, picked up the photograph, folded it into his pocket, and walked out of the bedroom. They heard the front door open and close. They heard his car start. And then he was gone. 6 weeks after the funeral, Marcus began searching for Gerald Morrow. He did not tell his siblings. He was not sure what he was looking for. Confirmation, context, or simply the face of the man in the photograph resolved into a real person with a voice and a story. He started with the legal document, which gave him a name and a signature date. He cross-referenced with property records. He ordered a DNA testing kit and sent it in, not expecting much and getting more than he had prepared for. The search took longer than he had expected and shorter than he had feared. Gerald Allen Morrow was 77 years old, living in a small city in the Midwest, retired, a widower. Marcus found an address through a combination of old records and a paid search service. He wrote a letter, a single page, careful and plain, and sent it to the address with no return contact information beyond an email address he had created specifically for this purpose. The reply came 11 days later. It was 3 sentences. It said, "I have been waiting for a letter like this for a long time. I am glad you found me. Please call me when you are ready." Marcus called on a Sunday evening. He sat in his car in his own driveway with the engine off and the phone in his hand for a long time before he dialed. The call lasted 1 hour and 40 minutes. Gerald's voice was steady and careful, the voice of a man who had rehearsed what he might say and then abandoned the rehearsal and was simply speaking. Gerald told him that he and Carol had met in the mid-1970s, before either of them had built the lives they eventually built. He told him that the relationship had been real and had meant something and had ended for reasons that felt significant at the time, and probably were not. And he told him that by the time he knew Carol was pregnant, he was already living in another state, and that the conversation they had, the one where they agreed on the terms that became the legal document, had happened over 2 phone calls and had left him feeling that he had done something he could not undo and could also not explain to anyone in his life. "Your mother was not a bad person," Gerald told Marcus. "She was in an impossible situation, and she made the choice she could see. I want you to understand that before anything else. I signed that document. She did not force me. I was afraid, and she was afraid, and we both chose the same way out. I have regretted my part in it for a long time." The letters in the box were not from Gerald. They were from Carol, written to herself, in a journal she kept intermittently across 30 years, never sent, never meant to be read by anyone other than the woman who wrote them. Daniel had assumed they were correspondence. Karen had not been able to bring herself to open them at all at first. It was Marcus, eventually, who read them from the beginning. The earliest letter was dated 1988, 3 years after the legal agreement was signed. Carol had written it sitting at the kitchen table at 2 in the morning while her children were asleep. She wrote, "Daniel is 9 now, and he is becoming such a serious boy. Karen sang in the school play last week, and I cried the whole time. Marcus is 3, and he said my name clearly for the first time today. And I thought about Gerald, and I wondered if he would have wanted to know that, and I decided that does not matter anymore, because I have made my choice, and choices do not unwind." The handwriting was steady. The sentence ended there, and the next one began with what she was planning to cook for Easter. As the years go on in the letters, the secret surfaces and then disappears again, the way a person might push something underwater that insists on floating back up. She writes about Marcus's school reports, and in the same entry mentions Gerald's name as though he is a figure she sees passing occasionally in a window. She writes about the weight of it in a letter dated 1995. "Sometimes I think about telling them. I imagine Daniel's face. I cannot do it. That they have built themselves around the story I gave them, and I do not believe a person has the right to dismantle what someone else has built just to make themselves lighter." And in a letter from 2011, when Marcus would have been in his early 30s and already a father himself, "He looks more like Gerald every year. I do not know if the others see it. I think Daniel suspects something and has decided not to ask. Marcus has his laugh. I have never told anyone that. I probably never will. She carried all of it, every single day." For 37 years, and she never told a soul. The fault line between the siblings opened slowly and then all at once. Karen's position remained consistent. Their mother had made a difficult choice in a difficult time, and she deserved to have that choice respected, not excavated and judged by people who had not been there. Daniel's position was more complicated. He understood the impulse to protect the family, but he could not fully close the door on the question of whether Marcus had been owed a truth that had been kept from him his entire life. Marcus's position was the simplest and the hardest. He was not angry at his mother. He could not be angry at someone who was gone, but he was going to know his father. He had decided that. He was not asking for permission. The first rupture was Christmas. For 30 years, the three of them had spent Christmas together at Karen's house. That year, Marcus brought his family to a different celebration. A lunch arranged with Gerald, who had driven 6 hours to be there. It was the first time Marcus had seen him in person. Gerald was smaller than he had imagined. He had salt and pepper hair going mostly white. He held Marcus's youngest daughter on his knee for most of the afternoon and made her laugh and did not say very much to anyone else. That evening, when Marcus called Daniel to check in, Daniel answered and was polite and asked how it had gone, and then went quiet in a way that said everything. Karen did not speak to Marcus for 14 months. 2 years after Carol's death, the family was not what it had been. Karen and Marcus had resumed contact, a careful, measured conversation conducted mostly by text, with phone calls gradually returning. Daniel had met Gerald once, briefly, at a family occasion, and had shaken his hand and been civil, and had not pursued anything further. Marcus had now seen Gerald 6 times, and they were building something, slowly, at an age when both of them had already built most of what they were going to build, trying to find a language for a relationship that had no established template. Gerald had given Marcus a photograph of Carol taken in 1974, years before any of the children existed. In it, she was laughing at something off-camera, wearing a coat Marcus had never seen, standing in a city that was not the one she had raised them in. She looked young and uncertain and completely alive. Marcus kept it on his desk. Some families are broken by secrets. Some are only broken by the moment the secret ends. And some, if they are fortunate and patient and willing, find a way to be something new on the other side of the truth. Carol had believed the secret would protect her children from pain. She had been wrong about that. But what the secret had actually done was store the pain, accumulate interest on it across decades, and deliver it all at once when she was no longer there to help carry it with them. She had not been a bad person. She had been a frightened one. And in the end, the box on the top shelf of the closet had said more about who she was than any of the things she had chosen to say out loud. If this story stayed with you, if something in it felt familiar, if it reminded you of something in your own family that nobody talks about, leave a comment below and tell us. We read every single one. Stories like this exist in more families than most people admit. And sometimes the most useful thing is simply knowing you are not alone in it. If you have not subscribed yet, now is the time. We publish stories like this every week. Real, human, and honest. Hit the bell so you are the first to know when the next one goes up. We will see you there.